Jai Hind everyone. I'm Raghavendra Anilkin Zavadekar, and on this episode of Katha, we bring to you Miss Rachael Westgarth, the CEO of Round Square, a global network that brings together schools committed to experiential learning, character development, and international collaboration. With a background in English literature from Oxford and a career that has taken her across continents, she has worked closely with educators and students to promote the principles of experiential learning, character development, as well as international collaboration. Under her leadership, Round Square has continued to expand its reach, deepen its impact on school societies worldwide, as well as innovate its programs. We are honored to have her with us today. And with your permission, may we start?
Yes, absolutely.
So my first question is, Round Square supports character education in 200 plus 60 forward-thinking schools. So it's again a two-part question. First, what is character education from Round Square's standpoint? Why is it so essential today? That's the first part. And the second part, how do you define forward-thinking schools? Are there certain criteria that must be met? And what differentiates forward-thinking schools from schools that those are not?
Okay, fantastic. So both very, very good questions. So Round Square defines character education. We have 6 core themes, our 6 ideals: international understanding, democracy, environmental stewardship, adventure, leadership, and service. And we organise all of our activities and our programmes under those 3 key themes. But we also, through interacting with those themes, students develop 12 characteristics. And so over decades of practice, we've kind of distilled a definition of character education down into those 12 different characteristics. And so some of them are, the traditional things that you would expect, like teamwork and communication skills. But we also talk a lot about courage and compassion. So it's really about a holistic development of the whole person. Sorry, second part of the question, ask me it again.
So how do you define forward-thinking schools? Are there certain criteria, specifications that must be met? And what differentiates them from non-forward-thinking schools?
Yeah, so I don't think there's not a specific criteria. So one of the important things about Round Square is that, we encourage schools. So we have Round Square schools. There's 290 Round Square schools in 50 countries around the world. Very different combination of different countries, different cultures, different circumstances and situations. And so, what defines good character education is going to be different in different parts of the world. And so one of the fantastic things about the Round Square community is that when we come together, so when the schools come together, the teachers come together, when the students come together, you learn about the world by interacting with each other and by learning about what character development looks like in different countries and in different parts of the world and different cultures. So there isn't a single kind of fundamental, this is how you must do it and this is what makes a good school. But what we look for is a passion for character education. And so, no school will join Round Square if it is purely about academics. Schools that come to Round Square because they believe, like we do, that education, the purpose of education in the world is to develop rounded individuals who can make a positive difference and make a contribution in the world. And Round Square's core theme is, it's all fundamentally based on the principles of Kurt Hahn. And we a kind of well-known quote from Kurt Hahn: "There is more in us than we know. Yeah. If we can be made to see it, perhaps for the rest of our lives, we will be unwilling to settle for less." And so, that's about pushing beyond your comfort zone and discovering that there is more in each of us, that we're all more capable of more than we possibly thought. And so that's a kind of, a forward-thinking school. That's what we expect, is that they're going to be pushing their students to discover what they're capable of, and then also set their own personal standards for excellence.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer, and it has really left me a lot to think of. And from the first part of my previous question, character education, I believe character education really the success of character education and how much it affects the student also depends upon the environment they grow up in, not just their schools. Mm-hmm. And I have seen this personally myself. My parents will often forget details about Round Square or mess concepts up, not because they're not interested, but because they haven't really interacted with Round Square on an individual level. Mm. We as students interact with Round Squares, but our parents only interact through us vicariously. Mm. So what can Round Square do to better engage parents so that the concepts that students learn at school, the discoveries and the ideals that students are exposed to at school are also reinforced back home? Because I believe that will contribute overall to a greater success rate.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the fantastic things about character education. It's one of the things that Round Square schools find is that, parents, and, as a parent myself, as a parent, if you're a parent that isn't a trained teacher and isn't experienced in teaching, being involved in your child's academic life can be quite challenging because you don't have that kind of expertise that a teacher in a school would have. When it comes to character education is really an extension of good parenting. And so actually, as a parent, it's much easier to connect with either the school life of your child, with your child's kind of academic life, if you're doing it through the character education piece. And so, it's something that we really strongly encourage parents to be involved with. With the youngest children, we have we've turned our 12 discoveries into characters. So the heroes of Discovery are cartoon characters, and so we have compassionate Carlos and courageous Colette and sustainability Suki, and these characters emulate those core characteristics that we're hoping young people will develop. And I think that idea of telling stories about those characters is something that helps to take the character development, character education into the home. And so, parents who can read those stories with their children is one good way, particularly with the youngest students, of engaging with character education that connects them to the school and what their children are learning in the classroom.
And a follow-up on that, could parent engagement become a more formal part of Round Square model in the future, similar to how student-teacher engagements are structured?
Ask me that question in a different way.
So
How do you mean? So that parents should be involved with
Round Square. So yeah, basically how teachers and students are, student-teacher engagement in Round Square School is structured in a certain way. So can you also include parents in that engagement?
Okay. Yeah, so there are some really good examples of, one way would be through the student committee. So most Round Square schools will have a Round Square student committee. A lot of schools will organise that student committee around the 6 Round Square ideals. And so it's a really great opportunity to get parents involved. Obviously parents in their own careers will work in fields that are relevant to different ideals. So, leadership is a very good example. So, parents who are working in a leadership position could mentor that aspect of Round Square in the school. Parents who work in any kind of environmental capacity could mentor that aspect of Round Square. And so if you think about the 6 Round Square ideals, there are lots of opportunities there for parents who have careers in those different fields or have expertise or experience to contribute to mentor the students in terms of how to take those ideals forward and develop programs and activities that are relevant to the ideals in their school.
And again, this is a question that personally hits close to home for me. Round Square promotes a spirit of non-competitiveness and overall collaboration. Mm-hmm. And that may be a hard mental transition for kids who come from academically intensive or competitive communities or cultures. So where ranking and basically your scores as a core part of your identity. And this is something I felt during the debates in Oxford because the results were not declared. Mm-hmm. And not knowing whether I had won or lost, it was really hard on me for some time. I mean, my abacus skills came in hand when I stood by the door and counted the people who went through either door.
Yeah.
So I got a score for
you tried to guess the outcome without, yeah.
I did, but again, not knowing it officially was quite hard. So my question basically is, how does Round Square support students from competitive environments in making this mental transition first? And how do you help them shift from an outcome-based thinking model to a discovery-focused model?
Yeah. So I think the how do we support is going back to the quote I was saying about Kurt Hahn, pushing beyond your comfort zone. There is more in us than we know. We do a lot in Round Square of throwing students in at the deep end, because actually when we challenge you, you do discover, as you did in Oxford, that you're capable of more than you thought. And so it was, the example that you shared, it was very uncomfortable for students to not know the outcome, because particularly if you're used to debating in a competitive environment, to be in an environment where the competition didn't exist. Beforehand, we had a lot of comments that, it's not going to work because, the students won't be motivated if it's not a competition. And actually, as you all demonstrated, yes, you would be motivated, because if you take away the competitive part, everybody focuses on what's left. So if you take away the competition, instead of focusing on who was going to win. You were focusing on what was the topic you were debating and what did you really think about it and what was everybody else saying about it and how was it affecting your thinking rather than focusing on the outcome and the pure competition. So I think, how we support students is actually by giving them those experiences where you live through it and you find out for yourself, and it kind of links to the second part of your question, that you discover through the experience that actually the competition isn't the most important thing, and that you have your own inner capacity for motivation that doesn't have to be driven by the need to win or the need to succeed or the need to achieve to that highest level, but actually is more about the process of, taking that step back, being more mindful about it, enjoying the journey and the process. And, an expression that we would say is to stop and smell the roses. But that's actually part of the point of it, is to give you the opportunity to have that experience. And then, again, thinking about Kurt Hahn, once you've experienced that, you will never settle for less. And so then the idea is that you will understand in the future that the competition is not, you might pause yourself and think, actually, this isn't just about who's going to win. This is actually about what's happening in the experience and, where I am and what I'm seeing and who I'm meeting and the conversations that I'm having, rather than being focused on the end game.
So the journey is the destination.
Absolutely.
And again, talking about success and failure and then this mindset, looking at Round Square as an organization, how do you measure success in a field like education where impact is often long-term and intangible? So how do you measure Round Square's success in making things more aligned to its ideals?
I think there are several different ways. Obviously we have mechanisms for measuring success. So we have feedback mechanisms. We have mechanisms for interacting with schools to find out, their feedback mechanisms. And so there's an element of, your school will be telling us about your development, but also when we organise events like, you participated in Inspiring Voices, we obviously have feedback mechanisms within that. And that in itself told us, we talked at the closing ceremony about how far opinions had shifted through the process of the debates that were had. And so we try really hard to find ways to share that quite immediately with you as students, because I think making that connection between what you've learned and the outcome as tight and as close as possible really helps you to understand your own learning, because I think there's a maturity that you bring to it as students, that if we trust you to understand why are we teaching you this thing, why are we going through this exercise, what is it we're hoping you will learn, you'll be more focused on that learning outcome. So that's kind of one piece of it. But then from a longer range perspective, Round Square has been around. We're about to celebrate our 60th anniversary. So we have a lot of people out there in the world who have participated in Round Square programs and activities and attended Round Square schools over the years. And so we know from locating those people and interviewing them, we're in the process right now of contacting and interviewing more and more and more of our alumni or our school's alumni to find out what the impact was on them. And so I think that's something that we know, there's an immediate impact of you took part in an activity and by the end of the week we can tell you how it's changing you. But then there's a much longer term process that says, let's find somebody who participated in an event just like that 30 years ago and find out how has that impacted their lives since. And one of the things that we know from doing that is that a huge proportion of people who went through a Round Square experience are more philanthropic in their adult life than they might otherwise have been. And so we have a lot of Round Square School alumni who are working for NGOs, but also a lot of Round Square School alumni who are working in business, but they're volunteering because it's so much part of their DNA that they can't imagine living life without constantly thinking about how they can be of service to others. So we know from those anecdotal evidence that it changes mindsets or it fixes mindsets in a really positive way that encourages people to contribute to the world.
I've noticed this thing about the Round Square ideals is that even if you successfully follow even one of those ideals, all the other ideals will come to you naturally.
Yeah.
So even if you just go through the service phase, internationalism, adventure, they'll come to you naturally. Because if you want to serve someone, then you'll go to that far off place, you'll serve them, and that is adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing. You know, if you took a cross section, if you went outside now and talked to took a poll from everybody in the room and said which is the most important of the round square ideals, you'd probably get 6 different answers, because different people view it from different perspectives. But it's like approaching a cube from a different angle. All of the other sides are still there, and so it doesn't matter which angle you access it from, you still are going to interact with all of the other ideals. So, this year with Inspiring Voices, we focused on democracy as a core round square ideal. But when you came to Oxford, it was an adventure. You were building your international understanding. So there are still the other ideals interact. Next year, we're talking about adventure, and adventure is going to be round square's big focus. But through that, we're talking about, so how can we, be brave in community service? How can we kind of, go outside our comfort zone to help others? How can we stretch ourselves internationally? And so even though our core focus is adventure, it's going to be bringing in all of the other ideals. So.
And that's quite interesting, and I believe it contributes in a large part to why Round Square is enjoyed by its students, by participating students that much. Because I personally enjoy, it's not that I study Round Square, the ideals, and I try to imbibe them, but I enjoy them more than more than the academic part of understanding what Round Square is and how the mechanism works. It's the enjoyment that comes from talking to people and talking to teachers as well.
Yeah.
Because not just the delegates, or if you also talk to the mentors, they'll give you some wonderful feedback and some wonderful experiences. And that's amazing.
So we talk about the difference between being round square and doing round square. They're both very important, but what we're aiming for is being round square. And you get there through doing, but that's, as you say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you are and how you feel, and it's about your belief and your philosophy on life as much as it is about your actions and your activities.
And again, shifting our focus on you now, you come from a humanities background with an English degree from Oxford. And when we think of executive leadership in places like India, at least, we still associate it with more traditional paths, such as a degree in business administration, maybe. So, how has your humanities training better disposed you as a leader? How does it help you better communicate with others? How does it help you make better decisions and lead better overall in general?
I think that's it. It's about communication, isn't it? I think a big part of leadership is about communication, and I think storytelling as well. You have to be able to inspire other people with the story of the organisation that you're leading, or the cause that you're leading, or the initiative, or the campaign. So, so much of leadership is about storytelling. The technical ability is one thing, but actually, if you have a good team of people who are technically capable, your role as a leader is to inspire those people to apply their skills to the job in hand. And so I think, personally, I would, because I'm biased, but personally I think communication is probably the biggest, the biggest skill that you need as a leader, the most important skill that you need as a leader. But I also think, when I left university and went into my first job, and then quite quickly ended up working in PR. The first thing I was told on my first day in PR is forget everything you knew about how to write, because it doesn't mean anything in business, because the techniques that you use are completely different. And I think that's probably true of any field where you come from the academic world into the working world. You're relearning again. And it's a lifelong, we talk about lifelong learning, and lifelong learning is an important thing. But I think, whatever discipline you study, when you go into the world of work, there's still a shift that you have to go through to learn. And so I think most courses of study can be applied to most careers, unless it's a kind of technical specialism.
And again, you have described your role at Round Square as the best job in the world. What aspects of leading Round Square give you that sense of purpose and joy?
I think, obviously being in situations of seeing the impact that it has, meeting people like you, hearing about the difference that it's making in people's lives, we met some children dressed as the heroes of discovery the other day, talking to us about what courage means and what sustainability means. And I think that, that for me is the biggest joy, is actually meeting students who are benefiting from the programmes and who really get it probably more than we do as adults. I think Round Square really resonates with young people, perhaps more than it resonates even with us as adults. So, that's where the energy comes. That's where the energy and the joy comes from, is from, seeing that it's making a difference.
And again, you've talked about seeing that difference being made. Would you mind telling us an anecdote where you actually saw that and it resonated deeply with you?
I think the experience of seeing the difference that Inspiring Voices made over the course of the week, we talked about, we took a poll at the beginning of the week of everyone's perceptions on a particular topic. We put students into mixed baraza groups. We held debates, and at the end, perceptions shifted. And I think there's a couple of things. One is the student participants understanding the power of communication and the power of their own voice and how much they can persuade and sway people, but also seeing in real time those interactions between students from different countries and cultures discussing a topic where perhaps they had a very strong perception of that topic and it was completely changed in the conversation. So I'll give you a kind of neutral anecdote of, often in baraza discussions, particularly on issues that are environmental, we find that you'll have people coming from one particular part of the world, and maybe it's a very privileged part of the world, who have an idea about how everybody should be in terms of their environmental practices. There should be no plastics in the world anywhere, for example. And when they come into contact with the reality of people who are living in more developing parts of the world and understand that actually clean drinking water is a privilege, for example, that understanding of it's not as simple as just get rid of this thing and everything will be fine. Everyone should stop whatever the practice is. And I think, those subtleties of understanding are one of the real joys of that building international understanding through human connection.
And with that, we have come to an end of our podcast here, and it was a wonderful discussion. And I must truly thank you for all the impact that you've left on our lives. And I really hope that all the other Round Square students will also appreciate this. And those who listen to this podcast will also be, even if they're not from Round Square schools, will be inspired to pick this up and carry it forward.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation. It's been great fun.
Yes, we are so honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.